The wind blew us apart so fast that I think she tried to swim back to the sailboat, back to our sailboat, which was probably, I don't know.
3 days after his wife vanished into the dark waters off Elbow Cay in the Abaco Islands of the Bahamas, Brian Hooker picked up his phone and called a friend. Not the Coast Guard, not a lawyer, a fellow sailor named Blaine Stevenson, a man Brian had eaten dinner with, anchored beside, and trusted for more than 2 years inside the close-knit world of the American live-aboard sailing community. On that call, Brian walked Blaine through everything: what the wind was doing, where they had been, how the night unfolded. He was calm. He was detailed. He believed the call was private. He was wrong. Because Blaine Stevenson has since uploaded every second of that 40-minute recording to the Stevensons YouTube channel, Sailing Cameo, for the entire world to hear. The U.S. Coast Guard and the Royal Bahamas Police Force are now treating it as evidence. And Brian Hooker is in custody. Subscribe and ring the bell now, because this case is moving fast, and the next development will land in front of you the moment it breaks. Before that recording plays out in detail, there is a frame that has been built around Blaine Stevenson over the past week, and it is worth taking apart before it hardens into assumption. The sympathetic version of events goes like this. Brian Hooker had just lost his wife. He was barely 3 days into the worst experience of his life. He reached for someone he trusted, the way any of us might in the middle of a catastrophe, and that person, instead of holding the conversation sacred, pressed record and posted it to YouTube for views. Betrayal dressed up as concern. A grieving man exposed at his lowest. It is an easy story to fall into. It also falls apart the moment you look at the actual relationship between these two men. Brian and Blaine Stevenson were not strangers connected by a tragedy. They were genuine friends built over more than 2 years inside one of the smallest communities on the water, the world of full-time American live-aboard sailors who moved their boats south from Florida down through the Bahamian island chain. The two couples first met in late 2023, anchored near each other in Bradenton, Florida. By Blaine Stevenson's own telling, they had shared dinner regularly. They had sailed the same waters, compared notes on the same anchorages, and dealt with the same mechanical realities that face people living this life. Blaine's wife, Marn, had been one of Lynette's closest confidants. Lynette Hooker had sent Marn some of her most private messages about her marriage in 2024. When someone frames Stevenson as a vulture who exploited a stranger's grief, that framing is factually wrong. Stevenson recorded a close friend on a decision he has since explained publicly and in detail, and we will return to that decision before this video ends. But the act itself was not opportunism. It was the act of a man who, by his own words to CNN, no longer believed what his friend was telling him. There is a second piece of the sympathetic framing worth addressing. Some voices have argued that the account a man gives to a friend 3 days into a search for his missing wife, exhausted, sleep-deprived, still processing, should not be examined sentence by sentence. That parsing a grief-stricken person's words is unfair by definition. There is a sliver of truth in that argument. The rest of it evaporates when you actually listen to the recording. What Brian Hooker delivered to Blaine Stevenson on the evening of April 7th was not the halting, stuttering speech of a man falling apart. It was a calm, methodical 40-minute account that included specific place names, distances measured in yards, wind speeds measured in miles per hour, wave heights measured in feet, the sequence in which equipment failed, the angle of his drift, and the time police arrived at his location. That is not grief talking. That is construction. This video takes that account apart, moment by moment, in Brian's own voice, and places it beside the physical evidence, the meteorological record, and the statements of investigators to see exactly where one stops matching the other. The day of Lynette Hooker's disappearance was Saturday, April 5th, 2025. It began with the couple's 46-foot sailboat, Soulmate, anchored at the south end of Aunt Pat's Bay off the western coast of Elbow Cay in the Abaco Islands. Elbow Cay is a narrow barrier island in the northern Bahamas, roughly 200 miles east of Miami, reachable only by ferry or private boat from the mainland settlement of Marsh Harbor on Great Abaco Island. It is one of the most well-traveled anchorages in the American cruising world. From Soulmate, Brian and Lynette took their 8-foot hard-bottom dinghy out into the channel for what was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday on the water. Their first stop was Tahiti Beach, a sandbar on the southern tip of Elbow Cay that dries out completely at low tide, where a floating barge pulls up and serves drinks to the sailing crowd throughout the day. Brian described it to the Stevensons with the easy familiarity of someone who had been there before. From Tahiti Beach, the couple crossed by dinghy to Hopetown, the main settlement on Elbow Cay, a village of painted wooden houses and a candy-striped lighthouse that is one of the most photographed spots in the Bahamas, and had dinner at the Abaco Inn. The Abaco Inn sits on a ridge on the Atlantic side of Elbow Cay, looking out over both the Sea of Abaco to the west and the open ocean to the east. A manager there has since confirmed to CBS News that the establishment is cooperating fully with investigators and would not say more. The time Brian gave the Stevensons for their departure from Hopetown Harbor was approximately 7:30 p.m. local time. The Royal Bahamas Police Force has since confirmed that figure independently. The route from Hopetown Harbor back to the anchorage at Aunt Pat's Bay is short by any measure. A local charter captain later retraced it for Fox News Digital and estimated the full ride from the harbor mouth to the anchorage takes roughly 4 minutes under normal conditions. 4 minutes, that is the entire window inside which, according to Brian Hooker, everything went wrong. CBS News meteorologist Andrew Cack independently reviewed weather conditions in Hopetown for the evening of April 5th. His assessment, challenging for boating. Sustained winds of 15 to 25 knots, gusts exceeding 40 miles per hour at times, occasional showers. But Cack also noted that the shallow, protected waters between the cays would have dampened those conditions significantly compared to the open Atlantic. The same charter captain who retraced the route confirmed the channel between Elbow Cay and Lubbers Quarters, the short passage the Hookers were crossing, sits in the partial lee of the island. Brian told the Stevensons the winds that evening were running at around 20 miles per hour. The seas, he said, were around 3 feet. The sun was approximately 10 minutes from the horizon. The conditions he described were real. Every meteorologist who reviewed the data agreed. They were also, by every expert assessment, manageable for that specific stretch of water. And then, by his account, his wife went over the side. The phrase Brian chose to describe the moment Lynette entered the water has been replayed more than any other moment on the sailing Cameo recording. He did not say she fell. He did not say she slipped. He told Blaine Stevenson, in his own voice, without hesitation, that she basically just bounced off the dinghy. Bounced. In 20-mile-per-hour winds. In 3-foot seas. With the sun 10 minutes from setting. Off an 8-foot boat. Into the water off Elbow Cay. That was the word he chose for his wife of 25 years going overboard. If you are watching this and you have a theory about that single word, put it in the comments below before this video moves any further. Because the words a person reaches for under pressure are often the exact words investigators come back to. What Brian said happened in the seconds immediately after is a sequence now reported by CNN, NBC News, CBS News, News Nation, Newsweek, and the Hooker's own hometown station WZ's M13 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The dinghy key, Brian told Stevenson, went into the water with Lynette. It had not been clipped to anything. It had not been clipped to anyone. And the spare dinghy key, the one kept as backup, was inside Lynette's dry bag. The dry bag was with her when she went over. In a single second, by his account, both keys to the engine were in the water. The engine was dead. The dinghy was adrift in the channel between Elbow Cay and Lubbers Quarters with the sun going down. Lynette's daughter, Carly Ellsworth, has since challenged that detail directly. She told CBS News she does not understand how her mother ended up with the key in the first place. Brian was always the one driving the dinghy. Brian was always the one responsible for the key. The idea that Lynette had it on her body in the exact moment she went over does not, by Carly's reading, make any sense. The wind, Brian told Stevenson, blew them apart almost immediately. He said he believed Lynette had tried to swim, not to him, but back to Soulmate, their 46-foot sailboat still anchored at Aunt Pat's Bay. He estimated the distance from where she went into the sailboat at approximately 1,000 yards. 1,000 yards, that is more than half a mile. That is the swim he believed his wife was attempting in 3-foot seas and 20-mile-per-hour winds, dressed for dinner at the Abaco Inn, in the dark channel off Elbow Cay, with the sun disappearing behind the horizon. He said he yelled to her. He said he told her he had lost an oar. He said he threw the anchor out to try to hold his position. And then he told his friends a sentence that sailors around the world stopped and replayed. He said he could not see her anymore because, in his own words, the moon had not risen yet. Make a mental note of that sentence. We are going to return to it. In the minutes after Lynette went over the side, Brian told Stevenson he had thrown a flotation cushion toward her. He said he threw it as soon as he could reach it. He could not tell, he said, whether it had reached her or whether she had grabbed it. Other accounts of the same recording indicate she did not get it at all. Richard Cook, the lead of the Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue Team, later confirmed two things publicly. First, that Lynette Hooker was not wearing a personal flotation device when she went overboard, a detail Cook stated on the record before the sailing Cameo recording ever surfaced publicly. Second, that searchers did recover a flotation cushion consistent with what Brian said he had thrown. Brian himself left a voicemail for Carly Ellsworth telling her about that recovered cushion, that the Hopetown Search and Rescue Team had found it, and that crews could now concentrate their search in a smaller area. The cushion existed. The cushion was thrown. Lynette did not have it, and when she entered the water off Elbow Cay on the night of April 5th, she was wearing nothing that would float. 2 flotation devices were on that 8-foot dinghy. Neither one was on her body when the wind took her away from it. Then Brian told Stevenson that one of the pins on his oar lock snapped. The oar went over the side. With one oar gone and an engine that would not start, an 8-foot dinghy in 20-mile-per-hour winds does not move in a straight line. It turns, it circles, it goes wherever the wind sends it. So Brian threw the anchor out, and in a single unbroken breath on the recording, he delivered what has become one of the most analyzed sentences in this entire case, that he was yelling for her the whole time, that he yelled to her he had lost the oar, threw the anchor out, anchored the dinghy, kept yelling, and could not see her anymore because the moon had not risen yet. Hold that detail, we are coming back to it. What followed, according to Brian, was an hour of calling into the wind, an hour of yelling across the darkening water between Elbow Cay and Lubber's quarters with no answer returning. By the time he had stopped drifting, he estimated he was a quarter to a half mile from the spot where Lynette had gone in. That was the moment Brian Hooker decided to leave the location to go for help. The next section of the sailing Cameo recording is the densest stretch of the entire 40 minutes, and it is also the section most replayed in comment sections across the country. Brian told Stevenson he paddled. He said that as he paddled through the sea of Abaco in the dark, he spotted other vessels moving through the area. He tried to signal them. He used the flashlight function on his phone. He said he fired flares directly at 2 passing boats. He waved the phone light at a third. By his account, not one of those vessels responded. Not one of them turned. The paddling, by his own description to NBC News, lasted 7 hours. And then came the sentence that explains, in Brian's own words, why no one knew his wife was in the water for those 7 hours. He told Stevenson his phone had been with him the entire time, but that it only functioned on Wi-Fi. And out on the open water between the Abaco Cays, no Wi-Fi signal was available. That, Brian said, was why he did not call 911. That was why he did not call the U.S. Coast Guard. That was why for hours in the channel off Elbow Cay, the search for Lynette Hooker had not started. By his account, he eventually came ashore on marshy ground near the Marsh Harbor Boatyard on Great Abaco Island, approximately 4 miles from the spot where Lynette had gone into the water. Police did not arrive to his location, he told Stevenson, until around 4 a.m. on Sunday morning, April 6th. By that count, his wife had been in the water for close to 8 hours before any formal search began in the Abaco Islands. Near the middle of the call, Brian told the Stevensons directly that the two of them had done so many things wrong that Saturday night. He organized those failures into 3 categories: weather, equipment, and navigation. And then he delivered a line transcribed by nearly every outlet covering this case, that the whole evening had been a cascade of failures, and that it was something he was never going to forgive himself for. He said they had stayed too long. He said they had left too dark. And then, In a phrase this script is noting once and returning to, he said they had had no life jackets. He also said something that, if you listen for it, sits uncomfortably close to an admission. He said he had thrown the anchor out last instead of first. He said he could not explain why. He said he just knew that he hated the boat and that if Lynette did not come back, he was never getting on it again. The single most damaging thing on the Sailing Cameo recording is not what anyone else says about Brian Hooker. It is what Brian Hooker, in his own calm voice, says about himself. Now we return to the sentence Brian used twice on that recording, that he could not see Lynette anymore because the moon had not risen yet. The U.S. Naval Observatory publishes moonrise and moonset data for any location on Earth, for any date in history. The tables are public. Anyone can check them in under a minute. For the northern Abaco Islands on the night of April 5th, 2025, the moon rose well before 7:30 p.m. It was already above the horizon when Brian and Lynette left Hopetown Harbor. It was already above the horizon when Lynette went over the side of the dinghy in the channel between Elbow Cay and Lubbers Quarters. It was above the horizon for the entire stretch of water Brian said he could not see across. Brian told his friend he could not see his wife because the moon had not risen. The moon had risen. Check the tables yourself. The data does not change. On Wednesday, April 9th, 2025, at approximately 7 p.m. local time, the Royal Bahamas Police Force arrested Brian Hooker in Marsh Harbor, Abaco. On the same day, the U.S. Coast Guard announced it had opened a separate criminal investigation running parallel to the Bahamian proceedings. Brian was in custody. His attorney, Terrell Butler, was now doing the talking. Somewhere in the days between that arrest and Friday, April 11th, Blaine Stevenson made the decision the internet has been arguing about ever since. He took the April 7th recording, the 40 minutes Brian had no idea existed, and uploaded it to the Stevensons YouTube channel, Sailing Cameo. Within hours, CBS, CNN, NBC News Nation, and Newsweek all had the audio. The private account Brian had given to two friends in a phone call became the account the world was now judging. Stevenson has explained that decision publicly more than once and on the record. He told CNN he originally pressed record not to gather evidence, but because he was unfamiliar with that stretch of Abaco water and wanted to capture the place, names Brian was describing so he could follow along on a nautical chart. A sailor's reason, a practical one. He uploaded the file, he told CNN, because Brian was now in custody and could no longer speak for himself publicly. And because the people still searching for Lynette in the waters around Elbow Cay deserved every geographic and situational detail Brian had provided on that call. And then he told News Nation something that reframes the entire decision. He said directly that he did not want Lynette to be found a week later and have it emerge that she had still been alive, but had died of exposure, while information that might have helped searchers was sitting unused in his phone. That is his stated reason, in his own words, on national television. Stevenson was not saying YouTube could find Lynette. He was saying he refused to be the person who withheld information from a search while a woman might still be alive in the water off Elbow Cay. On April 11th, CNN sent Brian's defense attorney, Terrell Butler, a direct question by email. Was the voice on the Sailing Cameo recording her clients? Butler replied that she could not confirm it. She did not deny it. She did not challenge the recording's authenticity. She did not move against it. She has not made a single public statement about the voice on that tape in the days since. When a defense attorney, given the chance to say a 40-minute recording does not belong to her client, declines to say it, that silence is its own kind of answer. Today marks day 20 since Lynette Hooker disappeared from the waters off Elbow Cay in the Abaco Islands of the Bahamas. She has not been found. Brian Hooker remains in custody in Marsh Harbor. The U.S. Coast Guard criminal investigation is open. The Royal Bahamas Police Force has confirmed the Sailing Cameo recording is being treated as evidence in the case. A 52-year-old woman went over the side of an 8-foot dinghy in the channel between Elbow Cay and Lubbers Quarters at approximately 7:30 on a Saturday evening. She was not wearing a life jacket. The flotation cushion thrown to her did not reach her. The engine would not start. Both keys were gone. The oar was gone. The man at the tiller paddled for 7 hours before reaching shore near the Marsh Harbor boatyard. and called no one the entire time because, he says, his phone only worked on Wi-Fi, and the moon, by the account of the man who was there, had not risen. It had. This case is not over. Subscribe and ring the bell. The next development will find you the moment it breaks. Every fact in this script is sourced from CBS News, CNN, NBC News, News Nation, Newsweek, Fox News Digital, WZZM 13 Grand Rapids, the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the U.S. Coast Guard, Richard Cook of the Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue Team, and the Sailing Cameo YouTube channel. All quotes attributed to Brian Hooker are drawn directly from the audio recording published by Sailing Cameo.